in Erev Shabbos, Parshas Acharei in Eretz Yisrael, it's Parshas Kedoshim. Yitzhahara is trying so hard to pull us apart, to create a pivud, to get rid of all the unity, the achdus of Klal Yisrael. Svira, that's the big problem of Svira. That's the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died because they were not ne'kovid zeh b'zeh. They were lacking that achdus. And yet, what he doesn't realize is that this is exactly how we build up to Matan Torah. This is how we get to be K'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad through Torah. You give us two separate parshas that's only going to bring us together. So I'm going to do Acharei because I think most people here are in America. Chutz La'aretz. See if I can tie it into Kedoshim. Stories tie into everything. In Acharei Kedoshim is tremendous amount of mitzvahs. Like, I don't know, a third of the mitzvahs in the Torah. It's incredible. At the beginning of Acharei, it talks about the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, the highest of the high. At the end, it talks about Arayas, the lowest of the low. It's interesting, you have the whole connection. But at the beginning, regarding the Kohen Gadol, Rav Shimshon Pincus has a meridig Vort. We know there's a machlekes between Klal Yisrael and Tzedukim. How the Kohen Gadol would do the Keteris and the Kodesh Kodashim. Gemara Maseches Yuma. The Tzedukim would light the Keteris right outside the Kodesh Kodashim. They didn't have Torah Shebal Peh. It's in Torah Shebeksav. They would, based on the psukim, they said you should bring the incense into the Kodesh Kodashim. So they would light it, make it smoke, and then bring it in, as opposed to Klal Yisrael, which would go in with, the Kohen Gadol would go in with the spoon, the ladle, of the Keteris, and then he would light it and fill up the Kodesh Kodashim with the smoke from within the Kodesh Kodashim. And you can understand there's a certain homiletic understanding behind this, in that the Tzedukim were bringing in their outside influences, the things from outside the Kodesh Kodashim into the Kodesh Kodashim, and that's not how Klal Yisrael works. The source of our Kedusha is from the Kodesh Kodashim. We let that emanate from within. However, Rav Shimshon Pincus says a meridig Vort. Every avodah that's done in the Beis HaMikdash was able to be seen and spotted by, observed by other people, by Kahanim, at least the other Kahanim. But the avodah of the Kodesh Kodashim, the avodah of Yom HaKippurim, the Lefnim, Shimshon Pincus asks, what's pshat? Why can't you have a chevra, observing this tremendous avodah? Who wouldn't want to see the Kohen Gadol in the Kodesh Kodashim? We come out, we make an incredible party. MS Manei Dai. It was incredible to see the Kohen Gadol come out alive. It was meridig. Why does it have to be Lefnei V'Lefnim? And Shimshon Pincus says, and he has a way of using Mishalim, modern day Mishalim. He says, if you want to cook something, you put a pot on a fire and you make it boil up to see as hot as it could possibly get, and it'll reach really far. It could go way above 212 boiling. But if at a certain point it's going to max out. There's only a certain amount of heat that can be contained in this pot. It's only so hot as it's going to get, no matter how big the fire is. But he says, there's one way. If you have half an hour to Shabbos and you need to make a cholent, you can make it hotter. What do? Pressure cooker. If you seal it, you close it off, it's going to get even hotter. He says, in the avodah of the Kodesh Kodashim, it's such a high level of Kedusha to be able to reach beyond the top temperature of all the avodas in the Kodesh. You can't tell me that those were not heilige avodas. But if you want to reach the level of the Kodesh Kodashim on Yom Kippurim, that you need a pressure cooker. That you need Hatznei Alechasim Alekecha. You have to go inside Lefnei V'Lefnim. No one else. It's just you and the Rabbeinu Shalom. And that's talking about the second Luchos word. That was with Tznius. And there's an incredible koyach of being a koyach that comes about from containing yourself, from being quiet. Those little avodas, the little 5 minutes you learn before bed by yourself and no one knows about it. Because when you do it in public, we're human. And if the Rav says a good drasha, the Baal Tefillah davens nicely, the Baal Karei lanes nicely, someone does chesed, he puts a coin in the pushka, there has to be some part of him that gets a little bit of impurity there, a little bit of gaiva, a little bit of kavod, a little bit of even just hana, that I did a mitzvah. But when you do it, when it's just you and Hashem, that's it. It's just my seder with the Bara Olam. that's Kodesh Kodashim. That's Kodesh Kodashim. And this is autobiographical of Rav Shimshon Pincus himself. When he was a little kid, his father and mother were both Americans who learned in Europe. Fascinating. And when they were living in New Jersey, don't think it was Lakewood, that wasn't really much of a thing back then, but there was a small Jewish community which offered Rav Shimshon's father, I think his name was Rav Avram Chaim Pincus, position there where they were paying a significant salary in those days, whatever it was, 30 cents, whatever a yearly salary was in those days, and they were actually living with somewhat luxuries. They had stuff. It was nice, and it was a good life, physically, monetarily. And after a year of living and doing great work in the shul and the community there, their daughter, I don't know her name, Pincus, came home from school, and she said, "Daddy, the trees outside are so pretty." Well, you see, it was mid-December, and that's when the trees started getting pretty in the neighborhood. And that clinched it. That moment, it wasn't even a question anymore. It didn't matter what the Pincuses needed to sacrifice, they couldn't live there anymore. They weren't bitzina. They were entirely open and vulnerable to whatever the non-Jewish world would feed them. And in those days, I don't know what the Goyim were actually feeding. Today, Allah has kama v'kama, kal v'chomer, that we have to create our own privacy, our own space where it's just us and Hashem to have Kodesh Kodashim. And there's no magical ending to that story. They moved to Williamsburg, where literally Rav Shimshon Pincus's father got paid a quarter of his other salary, and all their furniture they brought back from New Jersey. They never bought new furniture again, and they never saw luxury again. That was it. I guess the ending of the story is that they had a son who was Hagoyin, or Rav Shimshon Pincus Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Livroch. So that is a nice ending. Have a beautiful Shabbos!